in the last year of the Big Ten East. All right, let's get to Penn State. Lucas mentioned them. 11-2 in 2022, 7-2 in the Big Ten. A Rose Bowl victory over Utah after a 10-2 regular season. I wrote down on my sheet Penn State in purgatory. 11-0 versus everyone on their schedule last year, not named Ohio State and not named Michigan. Michigan beat them up pretty good. The Wolverines were able to beat Penn State 41-17. Ohio State beat them by 13 at home in late November last year. The Sean Clifford era is over. Drew Allar, former five-star quarterback in the 2022 recruiting class, is replacing Sean Clifford. And Lucas, when I look at Drew Allar, it's can Drew Allar take Penn State where like Deshaun Watson took Clemson, I think is the comp, or where Joe Burrow took LSU, right? Like that, Penn State, I think it's a little bit like what LSU was in the late 2010s, right, where they were always a quarterback away. They had so many good players at wide receiver. They had so many good players in the secondary and on defense. They just didn't get enough elite quarterback play to win national titles and compete against Alabama. And Penn State has kind of been the same. Like, Penn State is churning out first-round draft picks in the secondary. They're churning out really elite offensive linemen. They've got maybe the best running back core in the Big Ten, and that's saying something considering the two teams we talked about, just now. So to me, this whole season rides on Drew Aller. Like, how good is Drew Aller? Can he be the Deshaun Watson or Joe Burrow? I know that's lofty expectations, but that's kind of, I think, what people are expecting of him. So it sounds like you're pretty high on Penn State, so why don't you talk to me about the Nittany Lions?
I am, and maybe it's just because I'm sick and tired of Michigan and Penn State winning this division. That when
you mean Ohio State?
Ohio State. Excuse me. Ohio State, Michigan State coming. That when you see a good Penn State coming along, it's a little bit easier to stick to them because I think just naturally us as humans we want to see something different. But you mentioned it. Like, how many times is it that we see a experienced starter leave a college team? And yet people think that team is going to be better with a guy who has never started a game in his life. And that's what you have with Drew Aller. And he looks the part completely. And they have, you mentioned it, they have the surrounding parts. You have Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, both who were true freshmen last year, almost combined rush for 2,000 yards. You have one of the best offensive lineman in the country, and Alon Fashanu, an offensive line that was really good last year and returns 4 starters along with him. You know, you might worry a little bit about maybe who Drew Allar has to throw to because they lost, Parker Washington and Mitchell Tinsley last year. But they do return Keandre Lambert-Smith, who James Franklin has stated over and over again is ready to emerge as a number one guy, not just on their team, but in the conference. They also brought over Dante Cephas from Kent State. But I also think this defense is going to be, this could arguably be the best defense in the Big Ten next year. You have Manny Diaz leading that group for a second year in a row because they were somewhat young on that side of the ball last year, and they're still a top 10 defense. They might have the best cornerback in college football in Kalen King. His brother Kobe is going to be coming back at offensive linebacker. Abdul Carter, was their leading sack guy last year. Chop Robinson, who transferred from Maryland, really was a stud as a redshirt freshman last year on that defensive line. I think this is the type of team with everything kind of coming together. They've had good quarterback in play before. I don't know if they've ever had this good of an offensive line since James Franklin is there, which I think will pit them well against Michigan and Ohio State. And they get Michigan at home this year, too, which they did not have last year. So you look at, I just think the total pieces, I think everything is kind of fitting really, really well for Penn State. If Allar, I've said this, if Allar is 80% of what we think he's going to be, this offense is going to be insanely good. And I think the defense is going to take care of itself. It's probably going to be another top 10 defense. And that's why I kind of like them better than Ohio State, because I just think I feel much safer with them defensively on that side of the ball versus the Buckeyes.
Yeah, the biggest stretch for Penn State this year will be from October 21st to November 11th. They're at Ohio State, home Indiana, at Maryland, home Michigan. Those two games are going to be their season right there, right? Can you split Ohio State and Michigan, or can you win both of them? If you win both of them, you're doing really well. Lucas mentioned some of the names on defense. Chop Robinson and Abdul Carter combined for 20.5 tackles for loss and 12 sacks last year. Kalen King had 18 pass breakups. Crazy to think that they lose Joey Porter Jr. Might have a better cornerback on the back end. This was a defense. Did struggle a little bit against the pass. 46th in the nation last year against the pass. 10th in scoring defense. 17th in total defense. The schedule, though, before that stretch that I had said, the first 6 games for Penn State are West Virginia, Delaware, at Illinois, home Iowa, at Northwestern, home UMass. Very, very favorable. Over-under win total is 9.5. The over is -140. Under is +114. Non-conference, West Virginia, Delaware, and UMass all at home. Home in-conference schedule will be Iowa, Indiana, Michigan, Rutgers. Penn State will go to Illinois, to Northwestern, at Ohio State, Maryland. They'll get Michigan State as a road game, but it is in Detroit. Lucas, over or under 9.5 wins for the Penn State Nittany Lions?
This is an easy over for me. This team won. Even with losing to Michigan and Ohio State last year, they still won. That was their only 2 losses. They kind of crushed the competition out of there. The only game that might scare me outside of those 2 is at Illinois early in the season. Might be tricky. We saw last year, their first game of the year, they had to come back in the fourth quarter to beat Purdue on the road. And I think Illinois, at least defensively, is going to be really good again this season. At Maryland, maybe, is maybe a look ahead potentially before they play Michigan in November. But you look at it, too. You mentioned before they play Ohio State, they basically, let's be real, before they play Ohio State, they pretty much almost have like 3 bye weeks. At Northwestern, an actual bye week, and then UMass. So they're probably going to be pretty well rested going into that Ohio State game in the 3rd week of October. So that's another big reason why, and I think that should be a hell of a game as well.
Yeah, the over-under for Drew Allar fourth quarter snaps is like 9.5 in those 2 games at Northwestern and UMass. It's an over for me as well. The West crossover games might be the easiest in the conference. Illinois, Northwestern, and Iowa. Illinois week 3, I think that benefits you. They lost a lot in the secondary, as we'll get to. And week 3, maybe not everything is put together back there for Brett Bielema and company. So. At Ohio State, at Maryland is going to be tricky. Michigan State, I'm not too high on. We'll get to them here in a little bit. It's an over for me. I think the 10 or 11 wins is in the cards for the Penn State Nittany Lions. All right, let's get to Maryland.